If you're a man who's felt the debilitating pain of erectile dysfunction in your life and you're searching for a solution, this episode is for you. Today, we're going to be discussing the epidemic of ED in men and why this issue is so prevalent. We'll look at the root causes of this issue, as well as where the mainstream medical perspective and doctors fail in providing lasting solutions, as well as the ultimate cure that we as men need in order to heal this issue once and for all. Welcome to The Conscious Masculine. My name's Jasper Brown. And today I'm going to be sharing the deep insights that I've gathered on this topic over the years of working with many men as a men's relationship and intimacy coach. To date, I have guided dozens and dozens of men through one-on-one coaching and in my men's groups, and helped them overcome their ED permanently without any medication. So I'm going to be presenting you guys with my exact approach, which is derived from all of this experience that I've gathered over the years, as well as all of the unique sort of perspectives and insights. And I'll weave my own story and give you guys some very powerful examples to really help drive these points home. Towards the end, I'll also give you an exact game plan in very simple, methodical steps that you can go and follow for yourself to start addressing your ED today. So make sure you stay tuned for that. I'm going to assume that if you're listening to this episode, you already know quite well what happens to a man who has ED. So I'm not going to be going over that and covering that. I just want to jump straight into the insights that you need in order to actually make progress with this issue. So if you're a man with libido and you want to make love and your equipment is breaking down, the big question is, why is this happening to me? So much of this pain that we experience is the part of us somehow like scratching our head in confusion and not knowing what the fuck is happening. So I want to clear that up for you. And in order to do that, we need to start by making two key distinctions at this stage. The first is basically this category of physiological erectile dysfunction. And this includes ED that stems from cardiovascular issues like diabetes, hormonal imbalances, being excessively overweight, and the side effects of medications such as SSRIs or antidepressants or other medications that have side effects that might lower your blood pressure or have certain inhibitive effects on your libido. As men age, as we go through life, our testosterone drops, blood pressure drops, and we start to encounter more medical issues. And of course, sexual function and libido is impacted by this. This is just a natural feature of life and going through the aging process. And it's really important to highlight the very strong correlation between ED and age. However, if you are under 60 years of age and you're experiencing ED, it's highly likely that it's more related to the psychological factors. I'm not saying it's a perfect correlation, but for the most part, as you start to get older, we can see that ED is just a natural feature of getting older, especially in men over 60. Something like 40 to 70% of men over 60 will experience some form of ED. So we want to just be clear, like if you are in very good health, if you do not necessarily have medical conditions, and you're under 60 years of age, it's much more likely to be a function of this second category, which is the psychological and emotional causes of erectile dysfunction. And this is what I'm really going to be focusing on today. Personally, my lived experience of ED and most of the men that I've worked with have been under the age of 60. So I'm going to stick to speaking about what I have personally validated in my own direct experience. And I'm going to try to not speak beyond that too much. And if you are an older man and you have serious health issues, you're experiencing ED, it might be a function of that, and it's definitely worth seeking help from a medical professional. Now, with that said, I want to point out some of the major limitations that I see in the medical approach towards solving erectile dysfunction, especially for the guys who are in decent health and, as I said, under 60 years of age. So if we look around online and on YouTube and Google a cursory search of how to solve erectile dysfunction or a related keyword similar to that, you'll see loads of articles, loads of doctors, loads of videos and medical professionals basically talking about and tackling this issue of ED from a very clinical Western medicine approach. Talking about the blood pressure, talking about stress levels, talking about smoking, and promoting all kinds of pills and medications which will help you to solve your ED. Now, the issue that I have with this is the same issue that I have with most of the Western medical approaches towards fixing problems, which is that it's very focused on treating symptoms. And because of that focus, it somehow fails to dig into the root cause and actually treat the problem from the roots, and instead focuses on a topical solution that tries to treat the symptoms. And that's because, in a certain sense, Western medicine isn't very holistic in the way that it approaches treatment. Yet. Perhaps, and I really hope that one day the Western sort of scientific medical approach will advance to the point of being holistic and integrated in its approach towards health. But for now, it has a very narrow focus towards treating symptoms, which is great if you're in a car accident and you have a broken leg and you need to go in for urgent surgery, or you have some kind of acute medical condition and your life is in jeopardy. The Western medical system is amazing at saving lives and fixing problems like this. And yet there are also massive gaps. And unfortunately, I've watched this firsthand with my father, who was in hospital before he died with cancer this year. And what I really got to observe was that there was very little awareness paid towards a sort of integrated or holistic understanding of his problems. There was very little attention given towards things like his diet, his exercise regime, his emotional health, or the issues that actually created his cancer in the first place. Their whole approach was to cut out the cancer, blast it with radiation, and stuff him full of poison to basically slow down the spread of that cancer, basically treating the symptoms. Which obviously that can work in certain instances, and it's also somehow the best that we have at this stage. But I became acutely aware that it was missing so much of the bigger picture about his health, his entire health, the health of his organism as a whole. Because he was under fluorescent lighting, he was woken up during the middle of the night several times every night, so he couldn't get a good night's sleep. And actually, when he went into hospital, although they were saving him, they were also killing him. Because after 2 months in hospital, he came out like a shell of his former self, like a husk of a man, completely depleted, completely emaciated because he couldn't eat, because he had no appetite because of all the drugs that they were giving him just to keep him alive. And he was just chronically depleted, and that actually sped the deterioration of his health. And yeah, I'm sure he would have lived a lot longer if he had refused the treatment. So yeah, I really got to see the sort of inadequacies and the gaps. There was really just not this holistic understanding in the approach towards the problems. It was just like, here, treat the symptoms, have these pills, take this medicine. We won't pay any attention. We'll just give you crap food, wake you up all night, and yeah, not really approach things from a holistic point of view. And that's obviously, that's my deal. That's my jam, is to look at things in an integrative way from a higher consciousness perspective, and how can we tie together everything in order to make sense from a big picture perspective and see how that reflects in the smaller issues that we're facing in our lives. So it's really the same with ED and the sort of Western medical approach, which is to see that somehow your erection isn't working. It's not doing its job. So let's give you a pill that will make it go back up again and get hard again. Simple, right? Easy. Just have this magic pill. Take some Viagra and, off you go. You'll be right. But unfortunately, this is completely failing to understand why your erection has lost pressure in the first place. Right? If it's not a function of your age and your diet and your lifestyle and your stress levels, then, we don't really understand why. Because unfortunately, Western medicine is still yet to really understand the nature of trauma. It's really yet to integrate and understand emotional, psychological issues in the way that it deals with these kind of problems. It's starting to, but has a very, very long way to go. So now let's look at a more global and holistic approach to why you're actually experiencing ED. So to really unpack this, we need to lay a bit of groundwork and start by understanding the connection between our sexual function and our nervous system. So the nervous system is this interconnected lattice work of nerves sending signals to the brain throughout our body. And it has two primary distinctions to be made, which is the parasympathetic nervous system, which is responsible for things like resting, digesting, our libido, relaxation, sleep, these kind of functions. And we have the other wing, so to speak, of the nervous system, which is the parasympathetic, which is wired and helps us to respond to situations where we need to fight, flee or flight, and freeze. And this is what switches on when we are in a position of danger, or we need to ready ourselves for immediate action, or there is some sort of response needed to stressors in our environment. So this is a very basic distinction to be made between the different wings of the nervous system. Obviously, it's way more complex than that, but for now, this is all we really need to understand. And for those of us who have experienced or are experiencing erectile dysfunction, we can see that this is part of the response of the sympathetic nervous system, which kicks into drive when we are afraid, when we need to respond to a threat. If things are not jeopardizing our safety in any way, we usually chill around in the parasympathetic state. We can move throughout our day. We're not too worried by anything. We can eat, relax, rest, digest, make love, and everything functions very normally, let's say. And actually, in order to become aroused in the first place, we actually need to be in a parasympathetic state. Parasympathetic arousal, that actually allows the blood to flow because there is no constriction. When we tip into the sympathetic, the stress state, everything constricts, the pupils dilate, the blood vessels start to constrain themselves, so we are actually generating pressure that enables us to act quickly somehow. So already from this point of view, we can see that the sympathetic state is not very conducive towards arousal. It's much more complicated than this because, ejaculation and that process of reaching that point is a sympathetic response. So it's like a build-up in stress in a certain sense. So we go from a parasympathetic state being normal, and then we get aroused. And then as we get more and more excited, we start to tip into sympathetic. There's a certain sympathetic activation which releases the pressure on our nervous system, and we come, we ejaculate. And that's why we get this big dump, this big response in our system when we ejaculate. It's like everything down regulates, the nervous system down regulates, and then we return back into a sort of deeper parasympathetic state where we feel very relaxed, we feel sleepy, we feel like just chilling out, rolling over, having some food and watching some TV, for example. So that sort of begs the question, why are we so activated? Why are we in the sympathetic too much? Well, because we're stressed. Most of us are actually walking around with an excessive activation of the sympathetic nervous system. We're constantly bombarded by the stresses of survival. We're constantly exposed to electromagnetic influences. We're on our devices. We're multitasking. We've got the pressure of our jobs on our shoulders. Perhaps you have kids. Perhaps you have a stressful life. You have a lot of responsibilities. And all of this is creating a certain sympathetic activation in your nervous system. And in fact, most of us are walking around with some form of constant low-grade anxiety just because of the way that we live our lives. We've become very sort of discombobulated. We live up in our heads. And we've forgotten what it means to regulate our nervous system naturally because we're out of sync. We're out of touch with nature. We're often very unhealthy in the way that we live our lives. We're out of balance. And we've forgotten how to soothe ourselves. We've forgotten how to regulate ourselves. And so many of us are walking around in an almost constant form of fear. And that's essentially what anxiety is. It's a survival stress. Constant survival stress and the fear of taking care of our survival concerns on a daily basis, which is stuck in the body. And on top of that background of anxiety, we obviously layer our social engagement, and in this case, the engagement that we have with a potential woman or partner, someone that you are actively seeking to seduce or to start a relationship with or continue or secure the relationship with or to deepen the relationship with. And we've invested a lot socially in this game of attraction and relationships. And generally, this is one of the most high stakes aspects of our lives. The relationships that we form, they really dictate the trajectory and environment of our life, especially an intimate partner. You might end up spending years, decades. You could spend your entire life with this person, with this woman. So there's an incredible amount of investiture in these experiences going well. And anything that could threaten that is obviously going to be fear-inducing. There's obviously a lot of social weight that comes with that because, if we fail that relationship, this woman or whoever it is has friends. You exist as a part of a sort of local tribe of sorts in which you have a certain reputation. And that fear kicks in, and we're afraid of being embarrassed. We are afraid of feeling ashamed. We as men are afraid of feeling emasculated. We're afraid of feeling like we are impotent in front of this woman that we want to impress. You're afraid of seeing the disappointment and the judgment in her eyes if you cannot get an erection, or if you somehow embarrass yourself, or there is this awkward situation that unfolds. And you're afraid about what that means about you. Because on a very deep level, we as men and you are desperate for the validation and the approval from the feminine or this potential partner to bolster your sense of self-worth. You have chips in the game. You have money on the line, so to speak. The stakes are high because we're always looking to prove somehow that we are worthy of love. And so many of us men have these core wounds that exist inside of us, this feeling of I'm not enough. I'm not worthy of love. And we actually seek out relationships in a certain sense to validate and prove to ourselves that we are worthy of love, that we are enough. And so there's this kind of battle, this kind of game being played. As much as we like to think we are able to validate ourselves internally, so often it's not the case, or it takes quite a level of development to be able to actually achieve that. We are somehow at the mercy of external validation because that's how the ego functions. We exist as a part of a collective, and the way that society or other people view us really helps us to develop our sense of self. And so we're bound to this certain form of external validation, which is normal. I mean, everyone has this. We can transcend that at a certain level of development, but that's quite a lot of deep work, and most of us are simply not at that stage yet. So all in all, basically, we put a lot of stock on the opinions and the thoughts and the reactions that other people have towards us. And if they think poorly of us, if they judge us, if they label us, if they mock us or make fun of us in a certain sense, that hurts. That hurts because it pushes on this very core wound of our belief or our sort of doubt in ourselves that we're worthy of love or that we're enough. So that's the sort of psychological underpinning of this issue. And all these thoughts and all these feelings And these fears and these doubts that we have about ourselves are somehow bubbling away under the surface of the intimate interactions that you have. Most of us are somewhat conscious of these, but for the most part, a lot of these things are just happening at a very subconscious level. They're under the surface, they're in the shadows. And yet, unless you've done a lot of therapeutic sort of work or coaching or had, a deep interest in understanding your psychology, so much of this stuff is operating subconsciously, so you're not aware of it. And yet it's having a very profound impact on your behavior. In fact, it's really driving and motivating so much of your behavior. So subconsciously, you're thinking about sex and you're wanting to experience that with a woman or a man, if that's your thing. And you're seeking out these experiences because they're fun, they're satisfying, they're gratifying, and this is really a form of your survival. This is how we survive as a species. This is part of our innate function as a biological creature, is we want to reproduce, we want to form relationships, we want to procreate. So there's this very built-in drive to seek out these kind of experiences. And so we do. And yet so often that unresolved sort of psychological baggage and all of these fears and these patterns and these insecurities that we have are sort of at war with this biological drive that we have to have sex and to form relationships and to reproduce. And here is the beauty, because our body has a wisdom of its own. Your cock has a wisdom imbued within its own functioning. Because if you're in a state of stress, anxiety, this sympathetic nervous system, the fight-flight function, because your emotional safety and your ego is actually under threat and you're at risk of somehow embarrassing yourself or getting ostracized or judged, or your relationship is on the line, then your body will take over. If you don't consciously deal with the pressing issue at hand, let's call it that, then your body will do the job for you. And because most of us men aren't really educated to be in touch with ourselves emotionally, we're not educated or taught to be aware of the functioning or the state of our nervous system. We're not educated how to soothe and regulate ourselves, or even to really understand the ways that our emotions are impacting us. Because these are more, let's say, feminine trait. And traditionally, this has not been a very masculine quality. And that conditioning is still meeting us today. We're dragging that from the past into the present. Of course, that is starting to change. And if you're following my channel by now, hopefully you're more aware of this, the importance of emotional intelligence. But if we're not aware of that, then the body is super wise. The intelligence imbued within the creation of this system that is your body is infinitely more intelligent than you are. Than you, your conscious mind, your ego. The body is smarter than you, and it will cut off your sexual function because you're under threat. Emotionally, socially, relationally, there is a threat to your survival, which is that you could get embarrassed, you could get shamed, you could get judged in the eyes of this woman who will then go and tell her friends that you're an impotent man who can't even get it up. And that's bubbling away in the back of your mind. And your body recognizes that you are in a moment of danger, essentially. And the priority in that moment is survival. Your body recognizes through the system, through the nervous system, that your survival is actually on the line. The stakes are high in this moment, and you feel dysregulated. You feel emotionally threatened. And your body literally switches off sexual functioning because it recognizes that your survival is more important than getting your rocks off. That's the key insight. That is the main point of this whole understanding and this whole episode about psychologically induced erectile dysfunction. Your body will prioritize your survival over sexual function. It's as simple as that. Now, to illustrate this point further, I want to give you guys some actual examples to really drive this point home. And so you can visualize this and perhaps you can relate to some of these examples. And that will help you to understand this concept in a deeper way. So, example number 1, you're out at the bar or you're in the club and you meet a gorgeous, hot girl. You start chatting her up, you're flirting, things are going well, there's chemistry, and you can tell she's down for it. You're flirting, you're drinking, you're running your game, and you can really tell she's into you, you're into her, there is that spark. You're joking, you're laughing, and you're having fun together. And you are on the way home. You're taking her home, you've been kissing and hooking up, things are going good, it's looking good, you know you're going to have sex. But in the back of your mind, you're thinking ahead. You're thinking about what's going to happen when we get to the bedroom. Deep down, you're not sure if you can fully rely on your erection because you know you have this problem and it's happened before. You've had this happen before and it was embarrassing as fuck. So naturally, you're worried that it's going to happen again, right? So the closer you get to home and the bedroom, the more that anxiety starts to build. You're thinking, how's this going to go down? She thinks you're this stud. You're this hot guy she's just met. She's really hot. And you want to fuck her. But you've got this issue. And the worst part about this is, she doesn't know you've got this issue. But you know. So there's this incongruence, there's this split between the expectation that you've created in her head and what you're actually capable of. Fuck. What am I going to do? What's going to happen here? She thinks you're going to fuck her brains out and take her to heaven. And you know there's a very good chance that you're going to be limp. And that moment is going to be really, really awkward. Right? It was awkward last time. It was awkward the other times that it happened. It was actually traumatizing because you didn't know how to handle it. And you still don't know how to handle it. Remember, we don't necessarily know why this is happening to us, but we just plow on, keep going ahead, and pretend like everything is cool when actually it isn't. And unfortunately, that's what most guys try to do, especially the first times this happened. That's what I tried to do when this happened to me. You just try to keep going. You don't understand why it's happening. You're there willing something to happen and failing to understand the problem. Basically, we're trying to emotionally bypass the issue that's there and pretend that it's not there. Which makes the disappointment and the embarrassment so much worse when it happens, right? You're like this freight train that's heading towards a cliff at full speed and you've got no way to stop. You've got no brakes. And if this scenario plays out a few times in your life, it does some serious damage to you psychologically and emotionally. You'll actually tend to start quitting. You'll stop going out to the bars. You'll stop taking girls home because you just can't handle that humiliation. It's terrifying. It's traumatizing, is what it is. It's deeply traumatizing. And if this issue continues, if you keep approaching things in this way, you're going to get sick. If you're experiencing ED, you're already sick. There's a problem. This is the wisdom of the cock, right? Your cock is literally communicating to you, hey man, there's a problem here. You want to have sex? I'm going to take this away from you. No, there is a bigger problem here that you need to solve. We're not having sex right now until you fix this issue. Right? Interesting, though. So perhaps you can relate to that example. Before I explain more, I want to give you another example. First of all, I should mention that these examples, they come from my life. These are things that I've directly experienced. I've made these mistakes. The first example, yes, I did that. The second example, this is also from my life, and I've seen this pattern repeat in many men. So I think it's useful to show you these. And yeah, this is also helping you to see part of the solution as well, which I'll talk about soon. So example number 2, you've got a girlfriend. You've got a beautiful girlfriend. You guys have been fighting and the relationship is on and off. When you guys fight, she gets pretty crazy. Things get very emotional. It's a roller coaster. You love each other. There's this crazy attraction. You've got a connection, chemistry, all that. But it's disharmonious. It's toxic. It's kind of wild. When it's good, it's so good. But when it's bad, it's hell. Perhaps you can relate. Maybe at some point you've cheated on her in the past, or she's cheated on you. There isn't that much trust or emotional safety in the relationship. It's kind of this anxious, avoidant dance between the two of you, and there's a lot of unresolved wounding. There's stuff you haven't told her, and you know she's probably got secrets too. You've come together for a reason. You've attracted each other for a reason. Maybe deep down you've thought about ending it, but somehow you just haven't worked up the courage, or you're afraid of doing it. You're afraid of losing her. You're afraid of being alone. In some ways, you really want it to work, and in other ways, you are forced to admit that it's kind of fucked. It's kind of toxic, and maybe on some level, you want out. So after the most recent fight, she wants to have make-up sex to bind things back together again. And you agree, even though you're not really feeling it. So you get yourself into this situation, you're in the bedroom, lo and behold, you can't get it up. And you have that situation where it's like, fuck, you've kind of committed to this thing, you've verbally agreed, you've started to go through the motions, you've been kissing, but you don't really feel safe somehow. You don't feel safe. You don't feel like opening up towards her. She's said things that were nasty, abusive, perhaps hurtful. And that is on your mind. That is playing on your mind somewhere in the background. And you guys haven't really established emotional connection again. You're kind of using sexuality, or she's using sexuality to glue things back together in the relationship, even though there's this kind of emotional disconnection. So you go limp. There's no bueno, no activity down there, and your body is somehow pumping the brakes, showing you that there's something more important than having sex right now. You are out of integrity, my man. Because your mind is somewhere else. You are, in fact, actually emotionally disconnected from her. You don't even necessarily feel like having sex, but you've agreed to it. And that feels like, a lack of integration, a lack of integrity, a lack of connection. But you feel somehow pressured, and you're afraid of what will happen next if you express what you really think or what you really feel. Just because you're having sex physically, it doesn't mean that you're actually connected emotionally or that you're ready emotionally. Now, this isn't just a woman problem. A lot of us think that emotional connection, safety, intimacy, this kind of stuff, that's what a woman needs to open up sexually. And generally that's true. Women need that. Women need to have those conditions met in order to open up and, really surrender into their erotic experience. But here's the thing. So do you. This is a human thing. This is not just a feminine thing. Women might need it more than men. Men, generally, we get an erection and boom, we're off. Good to go. We don't need all of that emotional prep. And yet, if you are going limp and your equipment is not coming online, that is a very clear, unequivocal indication that you need something. Something is missing. It's like, Houston, we have a problem here, down here. That's your body's way of communicating, because how else is your body going to communicate? It's not going to send you an email. It's not going to, call you on the phone and be like, hey, dude, this is pull out, like abort mission. The body doesn't have that capacity unless it's in the form of sort of sending you thoughts. And the thing is, those thoughts are probably there. You're just not listening to them. It's going to send you a message in the form of emotions and thoughts, which play in the background, at the back of your mind, in your subconscious a lot of the time, because as I said, most of us men haven't really honed this capacity to really be in touch with what we're feeling, which is the body's way of communicating. And if we ignore those messages for too long, the body is forced to resort to more obvious forms of communication. It's like, hey, we've been sending you these messages, dude. The emails, they just keep bouncing. The emotional emails are bouncing. You're not paying attention to them. They're going unread. So we're going to send you an even stronger message. This is like the warning lights. The siren is like screaming now, because you lose your erection and you're like, fuck. Now I'm actually physically broken. Before I was just emotionally disconnected or up in my head. Now my body is sending me like a message that I cannot ignore, because my cock has stopped working. And that's like the last Hail Mary attempt to wake you up. Right? Interesting. Very interesting. So maybe at this stage, if this is new information to you, this is like connecting some dots in your mind that hopefully this is like, right. That makes a lot of sense. I hope that makes sense for you guys. When I understood this and connected these dots, it was a revelation. I was like, of course. How else could it be? Like, it's so obvious. Except before hindsight's a blessing. 2020, right? So I use these two examples to give you a bit more context to really illustrate and to show you how we as men often avoid the emotional side of a situation and just try to bulldoze our way through it. Because we're horny, we want to have sex, our relationship is on the line, and we bypass the emotional problem. And that's just a recipe for disaster. Your body is literally way too smart for that. And okay, you can do it a bit. You have a bit of wiggle room. You've got some leeway. Sometimes we can sort of fake it until we make it. And sometimes that works. But if we keep running that script for too long, things are going to shut down. Your body will shut off sexual function when there is a bigger issue to be dealt with, right? So really, the issue here is an emotional issue. We need to learn how to create safety for our nervous system so we're actually in a position to enjoy sexual experiences the way that nature intended. And if we don't do that, if we don't take care of things in the proper priority, in the proper order, our body will take over for us and intervene, and you will lose the capacity altogether. That's the key insight. That's, if you get one takeaway from this whole episode, that's it. And start contemplating that. Let that percolate in your mind and look at the situations of ED in your life. And I think you'll find the closer you look, the more this has been the case. So obviously now comes the question, what do we do? What is the solution? How do we actually approach this? Basically, we need to learn how to tune into and start feeling the active emotional content that is happening and alive inside of us. We need to learn to soothe ourselves, to bring our anxiety levels down in order to make way for the performance, let's say, for the proper functioning of our sexual energy. We need to learn to communicate openly about what we're experiencing and actually create and learn how to create that emotional safety and the emotional intimacy before we actually jump into lovemaking. Because lovemaking unfolds on the background of the right environment. And just because we've convinced a girl to come home with us or we've agreed to have sex, it doesn't necessarily mean that the stage is set for a good experience. You can have really shit sex. You can have sex that goes horribly wrong. You can try to have sex and your dick stops working and it's not good, right? So we need to start recognizing that there is a certain environmental preparation that needs to occur in order for sex to go well. We need to learn how to create the proper expectations and prepare things so we don't put ourselves in a ridiculous situation where there is a huge disconnect between what we've promised and what we can deliver, right? I hope you see how important that is. Because if you go promising something you can't deliver, you're out of integrity and you're going to make a fool of yourself and you're going to look like an idiot. And chances are, if you've got ED, you've made that mistake already. And then we're doubling down on a recipe that doesn't work. So we're literally just shooting ourselves in the dick. If you know what I mean. So the main point here is that we need to learn to regulate our nervous system before we have sex, before we make love. We need to be calm. We need to be relaxed. We need to feel safe. We need to feel connected to our partner before lovemaking begins. We can't just rely on intimacy to create that connection. We as men actually need to learn how to create that connection before lovemaking happens. And, there's a saying that the foreplay begins at breakfast, which means we need to set up lovemaking. We set up the intimacy, days, weeks, months before. There's a whole, sex doesn't just happen. I mean, it does in the case of a one-night stand, but even that requires a proper preparation. Just because we can convince someone to have sex with us doesn't mean it's going to be good. And especially if you're in fight flight and you go ahead and try to fuck, it's either not going to work and you just won't be able to get it up, or you're going to come really quickly and you're going to have the opposite end of the problem. Because these issues of premature ejaculation and erectile dysfunction are very closely linked. They're basically two sides of the same coin because they're both a function of the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. They're both, very intimately entwined. So excessive stress and anxiety running through your body and in your mind and in your emotions, that's going to ruin your ability to truly enjoy and expand into an intimate experience with your partner or with your lover. So hopefully I've driven that point home and just hammered that into your brain. So hopefully that stays with you forever, to just really cement this and understand this. This concept is super important just to understand just that. So now I want to take things further. I want to give you a strategy for actually dealing with this issue consciously and without any medication. So step number 1, you need to admit to yourself that this is your issue. Literally speak those words out loud into existence. My name is Jasper and I have erectile dysfunction. Replace my name with your name. Owning the problem is half the battle, because once the cat is out the bag, you can actually start tackling this problem and begin the healing journey. If you're living in denial, if you are not owning this properly and treating it with the respect and prioritizing it in the way that it deserves, this will continue to be a thorn in your side. It'll continue to be your Achilles heel. So really owning it and, putting it in your crosshairs, so to speak, is the first step. I have erectile dysfunction. I'm struggling with that and I need to learn how to heal this issue. Step number 2 is speaking to someone else about it. This can be a close friend. It can be, your men's group. It can be a coach or a therapist. It can be a doctor. Just be aware of the, the kind of solutions that they'll give. And if they're not including this kind of angle, then obviously this is super important. The whole idea about speaking to someone else is that we need to destigmatize this issue. We need to stop isolating ourselves with this and trying to deal with it in the dark alone. And just remember, like 60 to 70% of men experience erectile dysfunction at some point in their life. So you are absolutely not alone. Chances are, if you talk to a dude, some guy, a brother, your men's group, a coach or a therapist, they're gonna be able to relate if they're a dude. Most men have experienced this at some point, and you will unburden yourself by, sharing the problem and helping and getting support. This will help you already to really destigmatize it, and again, bring it out of the shadows and into the light. Step number 3, now this one's really important, is learning to identify what you're actually feeling. This means learning to label your emotions. Putting the finger and saying, I'm feeling ashamed. I am afraid of getting judged. I'm anxious about what will happen if I can't get it up. I'm worried about what she is going to think of me. Or perhaps that she's going to tell her friends that I'm impotent. Developing the emotional intelligence to actually figure out what the fuck you're experiencing is really going to help you to navigate this terrain. Without any emotional kind of map, you are literally like flying blind in a storm, because you won't be able to orient yourself. You won't, and the problem is these emotions are in you, they're happening. It's just that you're not aware of them. You're not consciously able to point. You're not able to hold and allow yourself to feel. You're not able to soothe and regulate your emotional experience. So it's like bubbling and storming inside of you. And all of those emotions are getting stuck. They're unprocessed. And that's essentially what trauma is. A traumatic event happens. You have a bunch of emotional content that's inside of you. And because you don't have the skills, you don't have the awareness, you never got taught how, all of that stuff gets suppressed. You turn on the TV, you have a conversation, you distract yourself, or you numb yourself with alcohol or drugs or porn or whatever it is in order to avoid feeling all of that. Or perhaps you had, these traumatizing situations where you really embarrassed yourself, you felt a lot of shame, and that is stuck inside of you, unprocessed. And that build up, it's like slowly, like the space inside of you is becoming more and more pressurized. And we need to learn how to start letting that pressure out. We need to learn how to start, meeting that emotional content. And that starts with learning to label what I'm feeling. And then holding space for what you're feeling, and then releasing what you're feeling. And this is something we cover in a lot more depth inside my online courses. I give you exact tools and maps and techniques that will really help you to work on this systematically. So you're not just sitting there staring at your belly button or trying to grasp for words that you can't find or label emotions you just don't know. Where do you begin? So this is something I've really tried to create a whole sequence of tools and maps for you to follow inside my courses. And that's what we do. It's literally like a crash course in emotional mastery. So if you need help with that, you might want to check those resources out. The next step Step number 4 is really the point where we start to open this up and share these findings, share this content with your intimate partner. This is a sort of culmination of the previous 3 steps. This means admitting that you have this issue. It means speaking up and expressing what it's creating inside of you, the emotional content, and learning to create emotional intimacy through that. Because pretending this isn't an issue or keeping your partner at arm's length emotionally, that's not working. And it isn't going to cut it. I mean, it might. You can try. Maybe it's enough to just say, let's slow things down. Can we just take this one step at a time? I'm just feeling a bit stressed. Can we just, focus on connecting first, or I just need to warm up, or, something like this. That can work. But it's so much more powerful if you can actually bring your lover into what you're experiencing and say, hey, I really want to make love with you. I find you so sexy. And I want to experience that with you. But at the moment, I've been struggling with getting it up, or I've had ED in the past, and I'm just worried that that's going to happen again. And I don't want you to take it personally. I don't want to create an unrealistic expectation. It's something that I'm working on. And I could just really use some support. I could really use slowing it down. It would really help me if we could just take things step by step. It can be as simple as that. Bringing her into the process is really going to prepare her so she knows what to expect. This is part of fixing the incongruence between the expectation and the reality of what you're able to do. And we do that through communication. My love, we've just had this big argument and I'm still feeling like we're not really emotionally connected yet. You said a bunch of things which really hurt me, and I can also see that you don't feel safe being around me at the moment and that you're really upset. Can we focus on connecting emotionally first before we have any make-up sex? It would really be good I think if we slowed things down and just focused on, connecting to each other and validating each other and understanding what just happened before we jump into bed. So those are two simple sort of expression, like something along those lines. We need to build a bridge that helps us to navigate the emotional problems with our partner, because the sex is happening with this person and the problem is the emotional disconnection. So we need to learn how to build those bridges. We need to have this conversation in some form or another in order to get over the emotional storms that are stopping you from actually functioning sexually. To that aim, you also want to be with, and you need, a woman who is supportive and who will remain connected to you during this emotional process as you face this fear, as you work through this trauma and make space for it to emerge from your system. I can't stress how important this is. You need a partner who you're emotionally connected to, who you can actually create that safety with and have this kind of healing conversation. This means that you might need to stop chasing one-night stands for a bit. You might actually just have to focus on a more committed relationship where this healing can occur. You might need to be more selective with who you have sex with. and the conditions in which you agree to have that kind of intimacy. Because the more important thing here is not you having sex. The most important thing is that you actually heal this problem. And in order to enjoy the sex that you want, you have to go through the healing journey. So it's really important that you prioritize relationships with women who are interested in that are open to that. And what I think you'll find is that if you come and share this kind of thing and have this attitude of being in touch with yourself and really directing the relationship, because this is a form of leadership in a certain sense. I know it feels humbling and emasculating and like self-defecating to admit that you have erectile dysfunction, but you look like so much more of an idiot when you don't admit that and then you jump into bed and the woman finds out that you were just a pretender, creating this amazing, I'm going to give you the night of your life expectation, and then you can't even get it up. Like you don't look like a leader. You don't look like an integrated, healthy man. You look like a fool. You know how much more impressive it is to a woman when you can actually come in with this direction and set up a proper expectation and actually communicate openly and transparently what you're experiencing, what you need, and you're actually thinking about her. I don't want to give you the wrong impression. I don't want you to take it personally or to think that it's something wrong with you. This is just my issue, and I'm trying to work through it. It's stuff that's happened in the past where I didn't have good experiences, and it's still affecting me. And I want to bring you into that experience. I want to share that with you because I want things to go well between us, and I really respect you and I really admire you, and I want us to have a good time and potentially have this amazing relationship. That is so much more admirable. And a woman will look at that and be like, fuck, that is a man right there. That takes some balls to admit that. That takes a certain vision and clarity and leadership to be able to transmit that kind of direction. I hope you can see that. So that brings us to step number 5. Obviously, this is a leap. I recognize that this is no small order. This can be quite a daunting thing for men to do. And that's why we want to practice. Step number 5 is practice what you're going to say. You can do this in the mirror. You might like to find a coach. And this is something I do with the guys that decide to work with me around this issue. We actually role play this. And I help you to transmit the sentiment that I've just expressed in your own language and to get some reps in to make it your own. We actually break it down into smaller chunks that can help you get in the rhythm of exactly what you're going to say, how you're going to say it, how you're going to actually tackle this issue with your unique situation, with the woman in your life, in your relationship, or with the lover, or however it is. And these practice reps can really, really help you smoothen this out. It helps these experiences and this situation to unfold in a much more natural way. So you're not basically stumbling over your words and making things really weird because you have no idea how to say it and you're just trying to wing it and do it on the fly. Step number 6 is to take things slowly and remove this idea or this necessity for penetration to occur. Remove the fantasy about the crazy monkey sex that you're going to have with this woman. Get that out of your agenda for now. The focus for now is more about creating the emotional intimacy, feeling safe together, and establishing a deep connection. Because when you have those ingredients in place, your erection will reappear all by itself. chances are there is absolutely nothing wrong with you physiologically. If you're a middle-aged or younger man, you're in good health, you don't have any sort of medical problems, you're not morbidly obese and been smoking, and, your system is functioning. There's nothing wrong. That's why you often go to the doctor and the doctor's like, you're fine. There's nothing wrong with you. Just take Viagra. Everything, your equipment works fine. It's just a mental issue. So when we clear the emotional baggage and the clutter away and start dealing with that in a healthy way, your sexual function just will reemerge just as nature intended it, all by itself, when the conditions are right. Remember, sex happens when there is the requisite safety. So your number one goal, is creating safety first so that the sex can actually happen. Right? Drill that into your head. Safety first, then sex. And especially emotional safety first, and then the sex can happen. Okay? The last step is just remember that you are on a healing journey and that this is something that takes time. The Western medical approach is like, here's a magic pill, this can be fixed. Just take this pill, have this Viagra. It's all going to be fine. You're going to have a banging erection for 12 hours or 6 hours or whatever it is, longer than you want. Healing things in this way, the way that I'm proposing, it is not a magic pill. It takes time. You are literally in the process of dealing with your trauma, which has built up and accumulated over years, potentially decades. So it's going to take time, man. It's going to take time to unwind. And that's why it's so important to create the kinds of relationships in your life that actually support this process. Relationships that value authenticity and being real. Those things are more important than the superficial experiences or appearances. And a deep, intimate, connected, profound relationship is extremely healing, and that's something that sets you up for amazing long-term growth. It's an investment. Even if things are moving more slowly, the places you end up getting to are far more profound, far more life-changing. And if you're struggling with ED, you need to stop ignoring the warning signs and stop thinking there is a quick fix and just actually invest in doing the work. There's no shortcut here. The more of this work that you do, the quicker it will become. And you can tackle this issue pretty damn quick if you really invest in the right support and you do the right things. So there we have it. I hope you found this episode insightful. I hope this has connected some dots in your mind. I really had fun putting all of this together. It's dear to my heart because I've been there. I have been there. I know this pain. I know the pain. I know the shame, the embarrassment, the crippling disappointment, and the look in her eyes when you can't get it up. It's brutal. It's brutal. It fucking hurts. It's like it's ripping your soul. And the worst thing is if it continues. You just need a solution. And I share this from like the depth of my heart, man, because I want you to break free. I want you to heal. I want you to get over this and to get back to living your best life and really enjoying lovemaking and relationships in the deepest possible way. And so, yeah, that's why I'm sharing this. I've seen this basic recipe that I've shared with you here work absolute miracles on the men that I've worked with on this issue. I'm literally just giving you all my best stuff here because, yeah, I think men need this. And I don't see this talked about very much. I don't see other professionals putting this together. I just see when I look it up online and I search and see the top pages of Google and YouTube, it's trash. It's literally just garbage. So I really felt like there had to be a more nuanced and deep kind of perspective shared. And I wanted to transmit that for you. So I hope this has been valuable for you. I hope this helps you connect those dots and find your path towards healing. If you'd like to get personalized support and coaching on this, that is something I can offer. And if that resonates with you, just head to the link underneath this episode and book in a one-on-one connection call with me to see if we gel, to see if we have the chemistry for this work. Obviously, we'll be tackling this together, so you don't have to do it alone. And sometimes that's the best thing. And I guarantee that your progress will be massively accelerated by doing it with me or with someone. This is really like emotionally gritty work, and sometimes we just need someone else in our corner who's like holding up the mirror to help us see the blind spots that we can't see by ourselves, and to find that conscious knife edge path that leads us through the struggle that we're experiencing. And that's really what I'm here for. That's what I do. So you can contact me if that feels like it's aligned for you. Aside from that, please let me know what you thought about this episode in the comments. I would love to hear your perspectives, your feedback, and anything this episode has helped you to understand. I really appreciate your feedback. I've been getting, lots of nice comments and messages about the value of this, so I feel really inspired to keep creating more and more stuff like this for you guys. And let me leave you with this final point. I know this problem feels like your absolute Achilles heel. And it is. But I've seen time and time again that it's our biggest weaknesses that end up becoming some of our greatest strengths. It's problems like this that will actually truly transform you because the pain is so great. It's that pain, it's that deep, deep pain that you're experiencing that actually motivates you to break out of the dysfunctional patterns that you're in and really quest to discover something new. A new set of skills, a new way of relating, and a new understanding of yourself. And really, that's the growth edge. That's where we want to be as men. That's where we're truly striving and evolving, and our whole experience of life is like emerging and transforming. And that's where things are most satisfying. That's where we want to keep ourselves. That's where life is the best. And the more that we keep ourselves at that growing edge, the higher we climb and the more we transform. And that's the juice. That's the gold right there. So I know this seems like a big issue. I know it seems like something insurmountable. Perhaps it looks like this fucking Mount Everest in front of you that you don't know how to climb. But just start taking steps. Start taking steps and then take the leap. Face your fear. Try something new and discover for yourself what is on the other side. And I guarantee the more that you do that, the more that you deepen that attitude, and the more that you keep taking those steps and those leaps, the more this journey will unfold. And in a few years, you'll find yourself in a completely different atmosphere. Your environment will transform and change. And as I look back on my own path, my own development, my own journey, I don't even fucking recognize myself. Even just looking at myself a few years ago, I'm like, who was that guy? He knew nothing. Like, what an idiot. And I'm trying to transmit that. I'm trying to just channel my passion and my enthusiasm into this work so you guys catch that fire that turns into a flame and becomes a fucking bonfire in your life. Because that's my purpose. That's my calling. And the more men that I can help to find that spark that ignites the fire inside, the better this becomes. The more brotherhood we have, the bigger the community becomes, and the more momentum we generate, the more help and allies we have at our side. So it's really through this process that you discover yourself, that you find yourself, and you transform yourself, and it becomes this addictive, virtuous, upward cycle. ED is the opposite. It's this whirlpool of shame that's sucking you down into the abyss. And as you reach the bottom of the abyss, that's a part of the hero's journey. That's the pain that motivates this deep introspection and confrontation with yourself, where you find and discover a new hidden strength. You uncover these new qualities. And you emerge from that abyss a completely different person, a new version of yourself, who is able to tackle the challenges, to defeat the obstacles in your path, to scale that mountain and to reach the summit. So if you're in the abyss, don't despair, because it's darkest before the dawn. Take your steps, find the allies that are going to help you to drag yourself up and climb that mountain. One defiant, courageous step at a time.